Welcome to another edition of ESG's Customer Success Unlocked webinar, a monthly series that is on a mission to answer that burning question customer success practitioners everywhere dread being asked. Tell me again, what is it that you do exactly? In all seriousness, our webinar series is intended simply as an opportunity to tackle some very important customer success topics we believe need some additional exploration. Because we're like a lot of you, we're tired out, but fired up. We want some depth in the discourse. We want substance without ego. We want more than a LinkedIn post that takes up one entire page of our screen and loses our interest after the first paragraph. We want to hear from people who have experience doing the things customer success should be doing, people who have ideas, and most importantly, people who have a generosity of spirit and are eager to share their points of view. We at ESG believe if we can mix that cocktail well, then this webinar series can help our audience members nudge the needle of business back home in their jobs. So let's get started. Today's webinar is entitled Digital Customer Success and CS at Scale Are Experiencing a Renaissance. Joining me in this conversation are three individuals I deeply respect and admire, and who all have deep experience in the subject. Sarah Hums is the Senior Director of Customer Success at Scale at a company called Klaviyo, which is a marketing automation platform with a built-in customer data platform. Sarah joins us from Lebanon, Ohio, which is just north of Cincinnati. I'm sure Sarah has lots of fun facts, but one that is extremely relevant today is that she and I worked together for a few years at Oracle. When I joined Oracle in 2016, I already had a history of working in and building digital customer success practices at a couple of other companies over the previous 4 years. So I was hardly a novice. Then I met Sarah and I learned. And the impressive platform she built along with the team at Oracle, and she was continuing to build, really made me stand up and take notice of that. We became fast friends. Sarah left Oracle in 2019 to join DocuSign, where she repeated her accomplishments. And now she's at Klaviyo, applying her magic yet again. I'm thrilled she's joining us today. Welcome, Sarah. Angeline Gavino is the Vice President of Customer Success and Support at Katalon, which is a modern, comprehensive quality management platform that helps teams of any size deliver the highest quality digital experiences. It's a robust solution for end-to-end web automated testing, automated REST and GraphQL API testing, and it offers click and run cloud environments for native apps and mobile browsers. Angeline joins us from Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. An interesting dimension that she brings to this discussion is her responsibility for overseeing both customer success and support. We know there have always been natural synergies between these organizations, but I would argue that the synergies were not fully exploited at the digital and process levels. I've spoken with Angeline, and I feel she has an appreciation for the broader scope and broader business value proposition of tighter digital alignment and integration between these orgs. Now, I don't know Angeline well enough to offer a fun fact, but I will say she's the first guest I've invited on this show based solely on their LinkedIn presence. Her high quality posts about digital customer success on LinkedIn are must-sees, and to me anyway, offer proof of her experience in the space. Her knowledge about digital and her ability to communicate it succinctly have always impressed me, and I thank her for accepting my invitation to join us today. Welcome, Angeline. Madeline, I'll start with a fun fact about Madeline. While living in Mile High City, Denver, Colorado, in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, doing all those wildernessy and yogic things they like to do up there, she's secretly a Canadian. Actually, it's not so secret, and the real fact is that she's a dual citizen of Canada and the United States, which gives her some interesting options, if you know what I mean. Madeline is a colleague of mine at ESG, and here's my quick plug in this webinar for our company. ESG's purpose is to help companies build and operationalize customer success organizations or to transform their existing ones. Through our strategies, processes, and people, we help CS organizations strengthen their relationship to their customer community, improve their metrics, and accomplish their goals for improving cross-organizational communications and processes, reducing customer churn, increasing retention, and creating the environment and the conditions for their authentic advocacy. Madeline is a customer success operations manager and a digital customer success manager at ESG, but really the titles do only a little justice to the strategic dimension of Madeline's work. She takes on a very prominent role in building strategic plans for ESG clients and in rolling up her sleeves to do the actual work too. Madeline, welcome to the show. Okay, so let's get into the questions I want to pose to you all. As I mentioned in the intro, this session's titled Digital Customer Success and CS at Scale Are Experiencing a Renaissance. It's intended to be provocative and to challenge what seems to be a prevailing opinion in the CS world that digital customer success and CS at scale through self-serve and communities are new concepts. They are not. Each of them have been around for at least a decade, and they aren't even new to customer success. So a question, what might be some reasons that digital customer success and CS at scale are finally finding center stage at this particular time? Even Gainsight just made them the central feature of their Pulse conference last week and made some splashy press announcements about them. Sarah, I'd like to start with you. Why do you think it's finding center stage?
Yeah, I love this question. It really made me think. I think there's a few things, but the one that's been on my mind a lot lately is it's all about the subscription economy and how we've really been moving to this world where everything is a subscription. So what that means is it's lower risk for companies to like try and buy software, lower price points, easier to exit, way easier to exit than in the past. So I think that that's driving some of this, recent resurgence of this. But I also think there's this whole concept of product-led growth strategies that's coming into the mix. And so if you think about product-led growth, it's bringing this idea that, free trial customers are in the mix as well. And so someone becomes a customer before they ever even pay you in many cases. And so that shifts up the need to really surround those customers with the right kind of resources, the right kind of support in these digital channels, because you need to do that in an ROI positive way. So I really think it comes down to that, the subscription economy, and then that whole product-led growth kind of strategy that's coming into the mix.
Any additional thoughts, Angeline, on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just hooking in on that subscription economy, right? Just like how the way customers purchase has evolved, I do also believe that there's been a fundamental shift in how customers wants to engage or to be engaged with their providers, because we've heard about customers getting QBR fatigue. Customers are working with so many tools providers, and cannot simply afford to meet with like every single CSM for check-ins, for QBRs, right? So we needed to find a way to evolve with that changing customer mindset and find a way to show value without the traditional methods that, white glove, high touch CS offers. And then on top of that, I just really think that leaders are realizing this is the natural progression for scaling. Digital CS used to started as a strategy targeted towards the SME customers, or the long tail of your customers, but then it has become evident that this is something that can be applied across your customer base. And so at some point, you can't continue to offer high touch across your customers. And what are you going to do? Continue to hire more to meet your company's growing customer base? So it's not really scalable. Like the old way of how we do it is not scalable. And so digital CS is just becoming more front and center.
Yeah, Madeline, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think just like digital CS and digital-led self-service and other existing CS concepts aren't new in terms of overall transformative customer solutioning, neither is artificial intelligence, but AI is growing rapidly in its computing power. And I believe that as do the eyes of consumers and customers. I think because AI specifically is making significant technological advancement, as well as making headlines within the marketplace at large, I believe that customers are really seeking a more truly hyper-personalized customer experience, and that companies as a result are growing in that overall awareness as well. Sure, digital product-led experience has been around for decades, but I believe that just like we've seen total business transformation in SaaS, we're also now bearing witness to that within digital CS as well. And then in addition to that, I think coming out of the other side of a pandemic, customers are just demanding more convenience and really want to be met where they're at. And that's across varying industries as well. That's an expectation that I think customers really rely on now across
Yeah, and that's really been well documented, and I think that's absolutely true. One thing I didn't hear, and which I think is true, is that there's a new generation of leaders in place now. And Sarah, when we were doing this years ago, and let's be transparent, there was a lot of opposition inside the company to embarking on this. Thankfully, we had a really strong leader of customer success at the time who passionately believed in digital. And it feels now that we were pioneering, even though it didn't feel like it was brand new at the time. It was brand new there, and so there was a lot of work to persuade and convince and to provide the proof. And Sarah, I always credit you with building the architecture so thoroughly that there was proof that. So I think, and I'm not saying that all people of my generation were Luddites and didn't understand the stuff. I think, but by and large, there was just a population of leaders in place that knew what they knew, were comfortable with what they knew, and thought they could just keep going in that direction. But I think the economy now, especially, is forcing the hand, and I think we're seeing a new generation of leaders kind of ushered into place, which for me is a really kind of hopeful sign that we'll see this change stick. Okay, the next question I want to move to. Econometrics is the application of statistical methods in the discipline of economics, and many in the world of marketing use it to explore at a finer, granular level the behavior of customers in response to the pulling of various levers, i.e. the launching of campaigns, for example, by the marketing organization. So the question is, if we extend that sort of econometrics discipline to customer success, what sort of metrics have you seen or that you use that effectively and accurately provide empirical proof of that digital customer success is working? Let's start with Angeline.
Sure. So econometrics, I've never heard of that word before. It's something you learned today. Didn't realize there's actually a term for that. But I agree. It's often hard to articulate just the value of digital CS, especially if you're starting. Since, like I said, it's something that's just constantly happening in the background throughout a customer's journey. So for us, when we started with digital CS, our main goal was to ensure we are guiding our customers to certain behaviors that for us meant that they are on the right path to success. So for us, the typical signals that gives us an indicator of that comes from product usage and adoption. So we'll look at recency, frequency, and volume of usage. And so, for example, because like I said, it's just guiding them towards certain behaviors. So for example, recency, number of monthly active users, frequency, how often are they logging in, volume of usage, which for us means how many test cases are they generating. So we look at that because holistically, just the last time they log in doesn't help us understand that they're engaged with the product, but how often they're engaging and at what scale they're engaging helps us understand that we're correlated to them seeing value, because that's why they constantly use the product. Now, so for example, our digital onboarding flow is meant to drive customers to that ideal product usage based on this metrics. But to your question, like how do you measure, right? So those are the metrics. But then for us to measure the impact of digital CS, we needed to measure the baseline. So we needed to understand where we're starting from before we even implement all of this. And instead of looking at what is the industry standard monthly active users or looking at industry best practices, we look at just making sure we're incrementally making improvements over time. and being able to track that. No, that's one aspect of digital CS for us. There is some digital CS components for us that are meant to be revenue generating. So that's actually the easier one to measure, because it's easy for us to track how much revenue or opportunities are coming from these specific customer success or customer marketing initiatives. So it's easy for us to tie actual revenue value to some of these. So those are a couple of things that we look at just evaluating digital CS.
So just on that last point, how would you characterize your conversations with your peer leaders or the senior leadership team of the company to believe in that attribution metric?
Well, that's the thing, because just like how marketing would track marketing qualified leads, so there's a way for us to just easily track engagement with our customer marketing campaigns by the tools that we use. So it's really like, this customer made this action because they read that email. We could attribute it to that. And then obviously a human component comes into play. I think that's what we have to remember about digital CS, right? It's not just about automation, but understanding where humans are expected to come in and just take the actions forward. So when a lead kind of, let's call it digital CS qualified leads, just because we don't even have a term for it, it's easy for us to really track that across. A lead becomes an opportunity is close, and we know exactly how much revenue is, generated from that.
Great. Sure, Sarah, you popped in.
Yeah, I could not agree with the way Angeline is thinking about this more. So the way that I think about arriving at these proof metrics that this is working really is by starting with the end in mind. And the end is, what is the ultimate goal that we're here to try to achieve? That's typically retention, expansion, customer lifetime value. I mean, that's put simply what CS is here to drive. And so then the next step is to go, all right, what are the meaningful behaviors that a customer takes along the journey, or the meaningful conditions that a customer would be in along the journey that correlate to those end in mind metrics, right? So I always hear this, like, how do you know it's working? How do you attribute everything back to exactly what you're doing? I think that's really hard to do. And so I think it's okay for us to say correlation is what we're going to go after, right? Like, what do we know are the behaviors that correlate to those things in the end? And then our job to be done becomes drive the customers to those behaviors. Like, put simply, that's what it is. And so baselining is really important, because you have to know where are you at in terms of driving those behaviors today. So an example of that from my past is we figured out that when a customer adopts 5 features, they are X% more likely to be retained and expand. So our job to be done is go drive more customers within our total addressable market base to adopt 5 features. And so that's kind of how we think about it, is like, figure out the meaningful behaviors, increase upon the baseline, and then you can sort of daisy chain the story back together. The one thing I will add is, after you've gotten the story, you have to go tell the story. So it's really, really important to, I think someone said to me once, like, create the news and then go tell the news, because that's how you continue to show value of this function. You continue to get investment in it on the resources that you need to go drive these things. So.
Yeah, and I think customer success professionals should be used to doing that, regardless of whether it's digital or conventional approaches. Madeline, I want to circle back with Sarah on something, but you go ahead and please let us know your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with both of you. As a CS ops professional, I'm a huge proponent for testing. So when standing up any digital effort, I believe it always makes sense to run user acceptance testing, develop test scripts, track pass fails, understand where things are working and where there's need for improvement. I also, from my experience, always recommend defining digital efforts in a phased approach and considering the build out of a digital CS MVP or a minimal viable product, and then testing that digital MVP with a pilot group, a subset of customers that meet your criteria for your digital engagement model, and then tracking to, as Sarah mentioned, those adoption metrics and success outcomes. Also performing a correlation analysis with a similar cohort of customers in the same criteria who haven't had that digital experience applied is a great way to measure how things are working. I saw a comment in the chat, but speaking with customers is always a great follow-up to deploying a digital CS pilot, really understanding that customer experience before the application of those larger digital efforts to the entirety of that digital customer base is something I would recommend as well. And then I love to what Angeline mentioned just in regards to overall human intervention. I think that when you can start to track those meaningful metrics across value and across the customer life cycle, you then begin to become a bit smarter on how you're driving value from an operational efficiency standpoint, and you're spending more efforts then on what it is that's really going to have customers stay sticky, keep coming back, and truly advocate for what it is that your business offers. So,
Madeline, I think you really made a good contribution there with your mention of checking with customers. I think I've always been a huge advocate of voice of the customer programs, and I think there's so many ways customer success organizations should be doing more of it. And it doesn't have to be some major, huge initiative that involves a ton of people. I think you can do this in kind of micro ways with testing your hypotheses with subsets of customers. And that's, to me, that's voice of the customer, not kind of a dimension of it. And so that's so critical when you're doing something that's new to a lot of customers. You want to introduce what you think is probably going to be really good service for them, but you need to kind of test it with them and check with them and see what their opinions are. Sarah, I wanted to just circle back on a point you were making. And actually, you're all making kind of, you're hinting at it. And I don't mean hinting and like you're avoiding it, like you're hinting at something that needs to be said, which is that digital customer success, I believe, requires a different kind of skill set in customer success. And Sarah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on, if that's true, what do you think the skills or the attributes of successful digital CS professionals are?
Yeah, great question. I think a marketing mind is really important, and an awareness and understanding of marketing skill sets is kind of a foundation. But as I'm seeing kind of things evolve in the industry, and as I'm building my new team here at Klaviyo, what I'm really seeing as important is more of like that customer experience management kind of skill set. And when we talk about customer experience management, we think about things like, how do you look at customer data, voice of customer, qualitative and quantitative inputs to help figure out what's really going on with the customer experience, and how are we doing at driving to not just those outcomes, but do so in a delightful way. And so as I'm building my team, that's really kind of where I'm landing, is I need marketing backgrounds and skill sets, but also looking for those kinds of folks who really take that data-driven approach from the beginning. And then also are able to look more holistically. So beyond just, digital success being a marketing channel where you shoot emails at customers, if you go back to my example before, let's say that the goal is to drive customers to 5 features. Well, there's a ton of touch points that occur surrounding the customer to help drive them to that, in product, outside of product, marketing channels, non-marketing channels, human touch. And so the skill set of being able to orchestrate all of that into a seamless experience to drive to that 5 feature outcome is really what we're looking for, is someone with that kind of skill set.
Awesome. Yeah, I 100% agree. Before we move to the next question, I just want to kind of bring in a couple of questions and comments from the audience. Sandy Q, I think your question in the chat around how do you understand or look for signals that customers are ready to buy or cross-sell opportunities, I think that may have been answered through kind of Sarah's initial response, but also Angeline talked about kind of the framework, how her team operates. And I think those are the right approaches, as the collection of signals that you then kind of judge should determine a course of action for customer success. David Leibowitz, former colleague of mine at Oracle, he's at Veracode now, and he commented that he's doing some good work at his new company around looking at customer engagement and the community and understanding engagement at the level of downloads and how they post content on community. That's a fantastic way, audience members, of kind of really getting moving on digital, is really understanding how your community is engaged with the individuals in your organization, but also with the content that you guys produce. I'll go back to the other questions later, but I want to go to the third question that I have. So in my opinion, on their website, Tatango provides a good basic definition for digital customer success. And let me read it to you. I quote, they describe it as digital first customer success uses digital tools such as automated triggered workflows, communications, and reminders. By combining these tools with digital data, digital first customer success can guide customer experience towards outcomes that are mutually desirable both for the customer and for your brand. You can manage customer journeys at scale, cost efficiently, while delivering hyper-personalized experience driven by data. Now I say, close quote, now I say basic definition because while I think it describes a good framework, it kind of fails to mention how digital CS can be a powerful mechanism for driving improvements to CS and to other organizations through the act of collecting and generating insights from customer data. So my question is, do you agree with what I just said about driving internal improvements? I feel that a definition that only includes what it does for customers is missing half the value prop. If you agree with me, what are some of the innovative ways you're using that go beyond the conventional view of digital CS and CS at scale as being mainly about email, websites, and webinars, and that leverage data in a multi-directional way? Let's go to you first, Madeline. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the definition there is about halfway there, and maybe this is why organizations struggle with that. Like, how do I know that it's working? Digital CS isn't just set it and forget it and ignore your customer base so we can spend more time on big spender efforts. Digital is literally for everyone, and it's an engagement model that when you apply really concise logic and data-driven insights, should be benefiting all of your customer segments, but also your internal teams. So I like to think of digital CS really as both an internal and an external guidance system. It's for customers, of course, but it's also how organizations really get smart about operational practices that deliver successful outcomes. So, for example, say I have automation driving customer onboarding, and I'm expecting that by day 7, my customers should have completed their implementation and are successfully achieving our designated time to value milestone. Yet the reports are telling me that a large portion of that customer segment is really getting held up upon an integration step. And that's blocking their progress to what my team has set for increased TTV. So there you go. It's what teams do with that information really requires planning and internal cross-functional collaboration. It's some creative digital development to support customers on that actual experience itself. So often I think we see companies deliver digital efforts based on gut feel and internal know-how, but neglect to meet where customers really need to be met. So you build your digital journey, and then, as I mentioned, you test it. It's always an iterative process, and it's one that really requires a lot of operational change and organizational alignment, and change management, and a truly thoughtful, thought out digital experience based on what's actually happening with customers. So you're learning and growing along the way, and there's a ton of digital modalities that can be applied to close out on customer gaps. So it's above and beyond a simple marketing campaign. It's how do you understand the actual customer experience from the customer point of view? What are those gaps, and how can you use digital to systematically close in on those?
Yeah, and Angeline, I have a specific question for you, but I want to take off on a little bit what Madeline said and ask Sarah to kind of maybe give a little plug for, she's in a program at Michigan State University that really, I don't know if it's a master's program, Sarah, I can't remember, but it's about client experience, right? And I think that really crystallizes for me what Madeline's kind of talking about, this kind of multifaceted kind of way of looking at the client experience.
Yeah, it's Master's of Science in Customer Experience Management at Michigan State University. It's an online program. You're in a cohort, and it's all about what we're talking about today. How do you really understand the customer and build a customer-centric culture, and then drive to customer centricity in your organization. So yeah, awesome program, but it's really helping me with framing what I'm doing in digital customer success, but also, as we think about the evolution of digital customer success, I really do believe this customer experience world is really where it's heading, because it touches so many things.
Yeah, so maybe we'll be talking again on this webinar in another few months or a year, more about how that direction's going. Angelina, on this question, I feel like you have a lot of probably good kind of ideas on how data can be used inside your own company, and especially inside your kind of joined organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So I completely agree with what Madeline mentioned, right? Like, it's supposed to be servicing all your segments, right? And I think the problem that we see is that digital CS seems to be seen as like this entity that's separate from customer success, but it's part of your customer success strategy. And fundamentally, customer success is meant to drive, customer-centric behavior. So I don't see why we're disassociating digital CS from that. And so within that same thinking, we need to make sure that when you're looking at your digital CS strategy, you're also understanding how are you advocating for your customers, just like how your CSMs would advocate for their customers internally. So what digital CS has is access to wealth of data and signals. So going back to some of the examples Sarah mentioned, right? There are indicators of certain behaviors that could potentially signal, potential churn, maybe to somewhere down the line, potential expansion signals, they're ready to expand. But then also signals where, as Madeline mentioned, where they are stuck and they need help. And so we need to look at what those signals are for your product, because it could differ depending on, what the value proposition of your product is. But you need to look at keep watch of those signals and understand whether it's something that can be improved via, more better self-service documentation, more resources, maybe directing them to having a CSM jump in, like an actual person jump in to support the customer, or even signals to the product team that say, hey, there's something with the user experience that making your customers get stuck in this particular portion of their journey. So I think we need to think about it just like how we think about it when we're talking about customer success, the traditional customer success that we know of, just understanding this time, instead of customer sentiments, your actual customer interaction, you're looking at the data, how they interact with you, with any engagements that you put out there and your product too. And there are signals there that will help you understand how you could improve not just the customer journey, but also potentially your product and the materials that you're sharing with your customers.
So I think there's a question from Hannah Ridge that is kind of related to this. She asks, how do you know how to give the customer personalized value when you're working at scale with automation? So that's a thorny challenge, I would suggest. But you guys are the experts. Do you have ideas for how you can make sure, or at least make progress to making sure your customers are feeling a personalized approach, even though you're automating a lot of things? Sarah, you just came off mute. I'm sure you have ideas.
Yeah, well, I'll start this by saying you can go crazy with the personalization and spin yourself into a massive chaos, right? So I think it's important to not try to boil the ocean when it comes to this. A few things I've seen work really well is start simple. So if you're in a company where you serve different industries, industry-based personalization is a way to do that at scale without having to get down to like the individual person, right? And I've seen when just by personalizing by industry, the content of a program, engagement go up significantly. So just that little thing can help. So I think this is a great area where testing, back to Madeline's point, becomes a really important thing. So really, like, just thinking about what are those broad sweeps of personalization that you can do first. And then over time, as you get more sophisticated and you get more of the data science behind things, you can start to progress and march toward more user-based personalization, but that's really mature, right? So I would just say, start with the broad sweeps and try to just march toward more and more personalization and test into it.
And just on that point, Nishant Grover asked a question. For a global customer base, do you have thoughts around how do you address cultural nuances and localized customer needs in such programs? Anyone have thoughts on that?
I think just coming off of what Sarah mentioned, it's really about segmentation. If you really want to go that granular with your segmentation and look at language and culture, like we want to start simple, right? I think the problem oftentimes that leaders have when they're starting the digital CS, they want to do everything. And the reality is, even, in the experience that we have to have one probably user journey across the board if you want to release an MVP, like to Madeline's point earlier. But then you start to segment, but you segment where it really matters. And do you really feel like having a directed content or engagement with a specific segment of users is going to provide some value or impact? Then go for it. But I don't think that you necessarily have to hyper personalize. It has to make sense for your organization and for your customer as well. But I mean, short answer to the question is segmentation. You want like maybe a local language engagement with a specific, subset of your customers. You can do that. You need to have a way to be able to segment your customer base.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts on that? I've got other questions, but feel free to.
Yeah, I think this really comes down to what your digital engagement model looks like and encompasses. And then I would recommend, once you've defined that digital engagement model and who those customers uniquely are, depending on criteria, whether it's based on customer behavioral data or usage data, and then with the application of geolocation as well, then you can begin to map out customer touch points and explore ways in which those look different per your global customer base. But at the end of the day, it should be really more based on what customers are actually doing behaviorally, what products they have, and then how can you use different channels to meet them where they're at based on their own cultural needs, language, and so forth.
So just moving on a little bit, another audience question, and I like this one from Emily Lamb because I've always been really focused and fascinated on the large rock of transforming companies. And so her question kind of plays into that for me, and it is, who internally did you work with to launch a digital program? How did you get their buy-in? And I want to go to Sarah because you've done this so many times. You must have some thoughts on this.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned it earlier. Having really strong executive sponsorship is really important. And that's a great starting point. But it takes a lot of cross-functional collaboration to make these types of programs come to life. And so some of the key partners that are critical and that I'm always working with and building relationships with are our marketing teams. So those that are out there communicating with customers, those that own the communication systems that we use to communicate. So teams like Lifecycle. We also have super strong relationships and partnerships with our analytics teams and data analytics, BI teams, teams that are responsible for where data sits in the organization and how it talks to different systems. That's really important if you're trying to create these data-driven experiences that are personalized. And then obviously, I think the best digital experiences for customers are inspired by and modeled after the best human touch experiences. So, making sure that we're seeing like, what is a CSM that sits down and has excellent outcomes with their customers doing? And then how do we bring a digital experience up to parity with that and use them as a subject matter expert? What are our best onboarding services folks doing? And how do we bring a digital experience up to parity with that as well? So those are some of my main ones.
Yeah, and just on that point, I remember I was on Gainsight's advisory board back in like 2014. And I remember being in a meeting in San Francisco, a big room, lots of people, and Carl Rummelhart, the head of the VP of product at the time, asked the room, what should we be focusing on? General question. And I said, you guys should really revamp your product and mimic in a digital way and as much automation as possible what a great account manager is doing in their key accounts. They're servicing happy customer, really business focused, making sure they're orchestrating the right kind of energy directed to solve problems, all that stuff. And the whole room turned to me and said, well, obviously it's impossible at the time, but I thought that was quite aspirational. And I think we're moving in that direction. Sarah, I think your point is taken that supports that.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point. I didn't mention product, but I think now back to what I was saying in the very beginning of the session, with product-led growth being such a huge strategy, partnership with the product teams is paramount to all of this, because you can do all you want in email. You can do all you want in these digital marketing channels outside the product. But at least in software, where you want the customer is in the product, doing the things that will make them successful. So that is a more recent evolution I've seen of digital customer success, where that partnership with product has become the most critical one. Okay.
I want to move, in the interest of time, to a couple more questions. And this one is pretty tactical, and I don't think it's going to be, have to belabor the point too much, but I feel like it's important. We have to accept the premise that digital customer success and CS at scale offer tremendous opportunities to drive customer engagement and therefore improve the odds of customers finding more success with our solutions. But what tactics or methods do you use or that you've seen that increase customer engagement? I think we kind of touched a little bit on that, but I feel like we need to be a little bit more specific. So Madeline, why don't you start us off there?
Yeah, this is a great segue to what you were both mentioning. I would say ultimately driving customer experience in product. Nothing beats digital experience than internal product development. That's just plain and simple. When digital experience is driven really in-house, customer experience inevitably will follow. But if that's not currently a viable option, which is something that we often see, whether that's due to resourcing or roadmap expectations or just an overall lack of internal alignment, luckily, there's a vast number of CS supported channels. There's ways and tools that you can drive in-app experiences and guided walkthroughs to meet customers in the product itself. I would say tactically, considering persona-based messaging and usage-based messaging is a really great way to deliver an experience that customers will really care about. And then again, a VOC program, that's also another way to really get customers engaged. I think when customers feel like they have a voice in what it is that you are solutioning and what you set out to enhance through a digital experience, it's something that ultimately will lead to more engagement as well.
Yeah. Angeline, just thinking about your additional role or your broader role with support, is there a special kind of need for on the support side for nurturing them in such a way that's kind of that's a little different or more nuanced than, say, a customer going through the adoption phase and is not having a technical problem?
Yeah, well, I think, in most organizations I work with, not just in, Katalon where I work, but we're working in right now, support always works hand in hand with success when it comes to just documentation and self-serve resources. And typically when you're getting started on your digital CS strategy overall, that's really where you start. What are those materials that will allow your customer to self-serve? And so we collaborate a lot on that because number one, they know what are the frequently asked questions, like where do customers usually get stuck based on tickets. And we use that lens to help us understand where customers would probably need more help and where we probably need better documentation, things like that. And then right now, it was mentioned earlier, AI, we're starting to explore how AI can support us. And this is not new, right? Chatbots, for example, have existed for a while, but there are now more technologies because of GPT that's like, somebody asks a question and they're going to be able to pull in from all of your documentation across wherever they are, whether they're in your LMS, whether they're sitting in your YouTube channel, whether they're sitting in your dedicated knowledge base or wiki, that allows us to help customers. Again, like typically it's not just on top of automation, right? It's about helping them self-serve or basically allowing them to help them resolve their issues by themselves. So that's like some of the ways that support looks at how we can scale that, and the channels that we use as well.
That's really great. Sarah.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I've seen kill engagement is when, with the best of intentions, every single group at the company that wants to communicate with customers is communicating with them with no strategy, no holistic customer communication strategy. And so that, I think, is the number one tactical thing I would say is some group needs to help with governing that and making sure that it's really clear along the customer journey, what's the leading metric you're trying to drive at that particular stage. So for example, back to the PLG strategy, free customers who are on trial accounts, probably the biggest thing there is you're trying to drive that customer to adopt and then convert. And so we have to make sure that all communications for that customer in that point of the journey are really organized around that. And we're not just blasting out messages that are unrelated to that. Similarly, there's periods during the adoption journey, such as onboarding, where you really want to protect a customer from being hit over the fence with a million kinds of upsell messages. And so it's really important to have agreements cross-functionally with all the different groups who are communicating with customers and have these outcomes to make sure that we're not really causing a lack of engagement by hitting them with too much disconnected communication.
So that's, I like people hate the word governance, but I like the word governance because if you're going to be a serious company, you have to have processes, and there needs to be sort of a comprehensive and logical governance of those processes, and especially when these processes are touching the customer in such an obvious way, can really affect the brand if it's really botched. So it leads me to the question: we know in business that most of the challenge with any change is the people component. In fact, the technology and the process pieces are relatively simple hurdles to clear in comparison. To involve and gain the full participation of the critical people component can often be slow and arduous. So what are some of the strategies you'd recommend for our audience to make the people component less of a significant hurdle? And I want to start with Madeline, because we've had experience with clients who struggle in that regard. And so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that, Madeline.
Absolutely. I'm glad this came up in the chat as well, and Sarah touched a bit about this. My recommendation here is really to first develop a comprehensive digital roadmap, prioritize your requirements, allocate your resources, define what it looks like to execute those digital strategies across development timelines, and then most importantly, gain approvals from executive sponsors and cross-team contributors. You, like Sarah said, you really can't boil the ocean on this, and it has to be thoughtful, and it requires a ton of internal collaboration. So securing the necessary resources, fostering that internal collaboration, and building confidence with stakeholders through a comprehensive roadmap is ultimately going to help lead to successful outcomes for your organization. And then also consider where and when a digital CS roadshow event might be applicable, or showcasing demo opportunities of what it is that you're building and how it's effective. Those I've seen as really strong ways to get cross teams bought into what it is that you're doing with digital efforts. And those are all ways that you can really help build up that digital CS story within the org. Additionally, having a customer journey map where all phases of the customer journey across multiple internal teams, and one that also takes into account the customer experience, is, if you don't already have that formally documented within your org, is a really good place to start.
Yeah, and Sarah, I think because you've had experience doing this from the ground up a number of places now, you must have some gotchas to avoid that you could share with the audience.
Yeah, I think where I have stumbled in the past is when I've been relying on intuition or gut feeling to go put forward a strategy that we think, because we're smart people and we know our customers, is the right thing to do. But really where I've gotten momentum is when we've put hard empirical evidence in the form of customer feedback and customer data to show where there is actual need to push on something cross-functionally that needs to happen. So for example, at Klaviyo, we have an excellent, strong voice of customer program that is raising up themes day in and day out they're helping make these things visible, not just to our customer success team, but our broader organization. So, using customer feedback as that source of truth for what you're trying to push forward, I think is a really important thing. And then evidence. So an example of evidence is things like we were talking about earlier. We know that when a customer engages with, for example, customer education and training resources, they have X% higher likelihood to retain and grow. And so when you put that stuff in front of people, it just becomes clear what needs to happen. We need to get more customers engaging with those resources. So we need to spin up these programs to help drive that. So I think just moving from the, hey, we think this is a great idea, to the data's telling us it's a great idea.
Yeah. So I have one more question, but I want to make sure Angeline has an opportunity to weigh on this change piece. So Angeline.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that would also work is showing the cost of inaction. What is the opportunity cost of, like not doing this? And how do you do that? You understand your current situation and the reality on the ground. And typically digital CS becomes front and center because your CSMs are overloaded, for example. So you start with doing a capacity analysis, a capacity planning analysis, look at your team's workloads, activities that they're expected to do for each account. And based on that, understand realistically how many accounts they can cover. So then you think about what are the repetitive activities that can be automated, and you quantify that by how many hours do they lose if you don't automate this via digital CS strategy. And then going further, what happens to accounts that they cannot cover? What's the revenue at risk because of no coverage? So these are some of the data that you can look at to kind of get the buy-in. And typically when you start talking about numbers and revenue, that gets people listening.
Yeah, and that, especially on that last point for me, I've mentioned a few times to people recently that long tail group of customers that you feel you're confidently putting at a different tier of service, that's very risky. And given today's economy and how quickly things are changing, are you confident you're making the right bets on which company is going to survive and grow? That's wild, if you ask me. So the final question I have, and I want, no more than a minute from each of you, because I have something I want to conclude with, but if you ruled the world, what kind of experience would you insist that each of your customers receive? So Angeline, let's start with you.
That's such a thought-provoking question. I'd say personalized experience. We kept saying this over and over again. I think just customers in general has moved to wanting personalized experience. And it's not even about getting the white glove experience or the digital automated experience. I think each customer expects a certain level of experience and engagement. And I see this daily dealing with thousands of customers. There are customers who don't want to talk to us. There are customers who prefer email only, customers who prefer meetings at a certain cadence. And so in an ideal world, I would love to be able to offer an experience where we are engaging with customers when they expect and need it, and within the right context, the right timing, and preferred format. I do believe digital CS will get there, probably not there yet, but that's the hope.
That's great. Sarah?
Yeah, really similar. I think if every customer could feel like they are our only customer, our best customer, our most important customer, that's the Holy Grail. And then as I think about it more tactically, it's like, how do we help take the burden off of our customers of being our customer? How do we make sure that they don't have to do any heavy lifting to find success? We're helping do that for them.
I love that. That's a good soundbite. Madeline, how about you?
Both of you guys are so good. I love this so much. For me, I'm a big advocate for simplicity. Simplicity leads to efficiency. Efficiency leads to success. So if I ruled the world, each of my customers would really receive an overall simplified experience that inevitably would lead to growth and success. I've shared my thoughts many times with Peter about the future of where I think AI technology can grow and go. And so, and also I have a CS ops brain here. So I would love nothing more than really for AI to step in and get really smart with data cleanup. I know there are companies that are already working on developing tech to do this, but super critical if AI could take a company's tech stack and organize its data map and then help to develop a digital customer experience based on complex data insights, that would be the ultimate dream.
What a dream.
Yeah.
So before we close, Kate, can you pop up that slide? I just want to show people our June session. This is kind of new for us. We're just advertising for the future. So next month, what is it, June 21st? We're going to focus on the product, customer success kind of together. And we've got three great guests, Bill Cushard, Denise Stokowski from Gainsight, and Morgan Putroff from CS4 Rev. And I didn't mention Bill's Dragon Boat, but if the audience please join this one, this should be a really good one. We're going to talk about those challenges between customer success and product, and how product sees things and how product sees customer success, and how we need to have both really working well together. I just want to thank Madeline Evans, Sarah Hums, and Angeline Gavino for joining me on this session. I was really looking forward to this one, and I think it played out exactly as I hoped. I hope the audience really found a lot of value, and I look forward to you joining us next month. Thank you all. Bye for now.